Okay, and we are live. How's it going, Rangers and overall hockey fans? Thank you guys all so much for coming back for the latest episode here at Rangers Review. Myself, Wardy, that is Statboy Steven. And guys, we have breaking news to get into as just over the past 20 minutes to a half hour, Gerard Gallant, the former head coach now of the New York Rangers, after being offended by the media and his final comments as a Rangers head coach saying, basically, how dare you suggest that I should be fired? What are these rumors leading to? Well, it was just announced recently that, yes, him and Chris Drury and the Rangers have parted ways. So Gerard Gallant's tenure as a Rangers head coach is now done after only 2 years with the club. We have played to get into sharing our raw reactions to this news, as it isn't all that shocking, but at the same time, it is a little surprising that it happened this soon. I'm sure caught Gerard a little bit off guard from what we heard in his comments. And yeah, let's just dive right into this one. Steven, how are you doing today, man? How are you feeling about this?
Well, I mean, like you said, it doesn't come as a surprise. I know Gerard Gallant said, if I can't stand by my record, then what is this all about? And yeah, the first Rangers coach to have 100 points in his first 2 seasons. But let's also not forget that prior to 2005, he didn't get a point in overtime for losing. Prior to, I think, 1974, there wasn't even overtime. So just to illustrate this, in 1994, when the Rangers won a cup, there were 4 teams that hit 100 points. This season, there were 13. So the magic barrier of 100 points, because it's triple digits, I think is a bit disingenuous, and it's not that great of a marker, in my opinion. But still, the Gallant had results in the regular season in year 1 and year 2. Made it to the conference final in year 1, which was great. The team overachieved. But in year 2, the cracks were starting to show. And I just want to start by saying that I don't think Gerard Gallant's a bad coach. I think he's a good coach. I just don't think he's the right coach for this team. Gerard Gallant is a very hands-off coach. Same with Alain Vigneault.
Yeah.
And when Alain Vigneault joined the Rangers in 2013, that was actually the perfect moment for a coach like that to step in.
Exactly.
You just came off John Tortorella, who brought this team to the second round where we lost to the Bruins. But he was a very hands-on coach, and the team had matured to the point where they didn't really need that approach anymore. They had the systems in place. They had the hierarchy set in the locker room, and everything was clear. And at the deadline, of course, they had Martin St. Louis, they had Brad Richards, they had Henrik Lundqvist in net. Girardi and Stahl were veterans on the blue line. McDonough was the up-and-coming captain. So that team, it made sense to give that team a coach that's a little bit more hands-off. But this team never felt like the team that thrives with a hands-off coach. Of course, year 1 is always the year where Gerard Gallant gets his results. In Vegas, he brought them to the Stanley Cup final. But still, 18 months later, he was out the door. So it's not like this is new to Gerard Gallant. It's a pattern that repeats every time. And in year 2, the Rangers just didn't know what to do. And Gerard Gallant just wasn't the right coach for this team. They needed a coach that has more of a system, that has more of a grip on the team, and actually does something when he coaches out there. I think what's really telling is that in a 7-game series where we were outplayed 5 out of the 7 games at least, Gerard Gallant used 0 timeouts. And my biggest criticism of Gallant is always that he doesn't adjust in the game.
Where have we seen that before? We've seen it at times for sure, but the consistency level wasn't there, and that's where you see those similarities to AV.
And criticizing Gallant doesn't mean that the players are not at fault. This is not.
They're certainly at fault. We're gonna be deep diving more into an episode next week.
There's definitely enough blame to go around. There's enough blame to go around towards the players, but this was the most talented Rangers team I've ever seen. Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, Tarasenko, Trocheck, Kane, and then a first and a second overall pick, and Lafreniere and Kakko, and Hedl, who's a young center who's up and coming, a Norris Trophy winning Adam Fox, a Vezina Trophy winning Igor Shesterkin, and a Hart finalist, Igor Shestyorkin, only a year ago. Then you have Keandre Miller, who has a very high ceiling that we always talk about. The talent was there. The talent was there, and then you sign Veazey after a PTO in preseason, which was a brilliant move. Jimmy Veazey has been one of the revelations this season.
Is that crazy to say? Heading into the year, who would have thought that? I mean,
if you would have said this to me a year ago, I would have called you crazy. But he's earned it. He's earned a 2-year extension. They trade for Nico Mikola in the Tarasenko trade to solidify that blue line. Ben Harper came out of nowhere and showed he was a reliable defenseman in a limited role that he was playing in. This team had everything to win rounds in the playoffs, and it just didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen is because you can have the best team in the world with the best players in the world. If they don't have a structure, then they're going to look slow. And the reason they look slow is because they're not skating with a purpose. If you skate from point A to point B and you know you have to be at point B, you don't even have to be that fast a skater to get there on time because you know exactly where to go. And this is what a team like the Florida Panthers does really well. And the Carolina Hurricanes that play like a 5-team unit, they have a system in place. They have a game plan where every player knows where to go when a certain player has the puck. If the left-handed D has the puck, the right winger knows exactly where to go to open up the ice and to give him options. And with the Rangers, that just wasn't there. It was like they were playing Friday night beer league hockey where it was just, well, let's go on the ice and see what happens. And that is my biggest criticism of Gerard Gallant. You don't pay a coach $3.5 million to just stand behind the bench and tell players, hey, good luck. And there needs to be some sort of system, and there wasn't, and it was very evident that there was no system.
And that's exactly where I want to stop you, because you talk about the no system aspect. We talk about the talent that was on this team that was through the roof post trade deadline. And when you have a coach that isn't making those proper adjustments, isn't putting the team necessarily in key, but saying, you know, we have you, Kane, we have you, Tarasenko, like we know what you can provide. So I'm not gonna really step on your toes much. Like, you go out there and do what we expect you to do. While that's all in good intent, there was no ill will that Gallant was doing that with. The ramifications that we saw is when you don't have enough of a structure with a coach, you don't have enough internal motivation that you're getting in that locker room from said coach either. And we just saw how lifeless this team got and fell flat on their face. You know, they had that great start to the series, and as soon as they faced any type of adversity and a goaltender that they weren't used to before, they had no clue on how to answer, right? So Gallant, when we evaluate his tenure with the Rangers, very AVS in the sense of like great start. Last year was a phenomenal first run with him. You could not have asked for anything better for what the Ranger team expectations were in the 2021-2022 season. So what they ended up being result-wise to this year, now you have expectations, and it just shows right away. And this, I think, is a fair argument to be had with why Gallant has been cut loose, even when he's been on successful teams, because he has not been able to have them do better than what he did maybe necessarily his first couple of years of being with said club from the previous teams he's been in the past. I mean, Vegas is an example too. I mean, he took them all the way to the dance his first year with them, and then it just wasn't the same, right? So I feel like with a coach like him, and same thing with AV and others, these guys have such small, short shelf life, which is frustrating for a team like this, that you're hoping that you get some longevity out of a veteran coach that, again, isn't a terrible coach. He made adjustments. He frustrated us at times with the kids, and then he was better. It was always a flip-flop, it felt like, aside from, of course, not giving them a lick on special teams, which was the Rangers' demise wholeheartedly in that first round against the Devils, not scoring after those first 2 games. So, you know, it's interesting how the Rangers really came together. Chris Drury said, we're pushing the button. We're sorry, Gallant. Like, it's just, we think it's best if we move in the right direction. I personally think that this is the right move. Again, Gallant is not a bad coach. This wasn't even like a David Quinn situation. It's different. No. It's for where this Ranger team is at right now. It's inexcusable to allow even a coach to return after falling the way that they did. And they lost that first round to the Devils, but if they had a hard-fought series where if it was, say, 1-goal games, right, and they were losing on overtime, like they were giving their best effort, their best foot forward, and just falling short, Gallant would still be here. But that isn't what happened. We saw a Rangers team play some of their worst hockey that we've seen easily all season long. Going back to game 5, getting outshot 20-2, pardon my French, in that third period is inexcusable. When you're losing, no less, there's no adamancy, nothing. Then you head back home for game 6. They do what you expect them to do at MSG. And then as soon as they're back in Prudential, it's the same exact results that we saw from the previous losses. They just did not know how to adjust whatsoever. And they looked like a scared small team, like the Devils were playing with house money. They had nothing to lose, and they were going in. They had the speed game. They had the transition game, entering the zone perfectly, and the Rangers just did not have a recipe on how to figure this out whatsoever. So in doing so, now we have Gallant out as Rangers head coach, and now it's imperative for the Rangers on whoever they bring in next. Please don't let this be a has-been, another guy that, again, has been in the league for a while. This is the one thing that I absolutely despise. I'm sorry, Steven, you can agree with me. I hate the constant circus, this constant cycle of the same schmuck coaches time and time again. I'm not
the revolving door.
The revolving door. I'm not saying this with Gallant specifically. I'm saying this with hockey as a whole. It's one of those sports, especially where instead of having outside minds that, again, can be great. You know, David Quinn was an outside mind. Give the Rangers credit. They went down that right. It failed. They learned their lesson. But you see other outside minds that have done well as soon as they hit the NHL, or maybe they've been long-term in, say, other organizations as an assistant. Like, you got to give these guys opportunities. And I think that's important for what the Rangers should do here. Like, I've seen some people say Bruce Boudreau. I don't want Bruce Boudreau. Like, I'm sorry that I have no interest in that. You know, he's been there, done that for the past 20 years. And then before we get there, Steven, I just want to add a couple more. You know, you talk about Joel Glenville. Yes, he was doing great with Florida until the whole situation with Blackhawks was brought up. There's no chance in hell that a Rangers team, especially, is bringing in Joel. I'm sorry. If it does, then I will be as shocked as you are, right? You go down the list further. Are there any coaches out there that you think would potentially be a nice fit for this team, Steven? I want you to tell me, because there's one guy specifically on my mind, because his time with his certain team could be coming to an end. Maybe this summer, not sure. But if he is available, I would like to see it happen.
Well, I just want to start off by saying, please no Daryl Sutter, because
if there
was ever
that would be terrible.
If there was ever a red flag about a head coach, it's that since Daryl Sutter was fired 2 weeks ago, all the players that had a trade request have rescinded it in Calgary.
Yep.
That's all I need to know about Daryl Sutter. And I'm also seeing coaches get hired for 2-3 years and then they move on again. You see the same thing in the NBA. Of the last 5 NBA teams, only one team still has their head coach that they won the championship with. It's ridiculous. Anyway, coaches that we're just speculating here because Chris Drury doesn't leak any information. The Rangers are very tight.
No, we're just sharing like our opinions on what we think could be a fit.
But a couple of names that have been brought up in conversations when I spoke to people. One is Andrew Brunette, who's now the assistant coach for the New Jersey Devils. He was the head coach of the Florida Panthers last year when they won the President's Trophy. Who did they beat in the first round of the playoffs? I forget.
But I know. And I was taken back that Florida, didn't keep him as head coach either. Granted, you can't judge them too much right now with the run Florida's on at the moment.
No, but Andrew Brunette was only the replacement for Joel Quenneville, so correct. he was only like a temporary solution. They hired Paul Maurice, and he's their long-term head coach. They beat the Capitals in the first round 4-2, and then they got swept by Tampa in the second round. It looks a bit ugly, but I mean it's the Tampa Bay Lightning. At the time, 2-time Stanley Cup champions. They beat us afterwards in the conference final. But Andrew Brunette is a young coach who got a chance with the Florida Panthers, and yes, it was Joe Quenneville's team, but he coached them to a President's Trophy, so that's not out of the question. The other name that has been mentioned by someone is Jeff Halpern, who's the assistant coach in Tampa, who coached the Syracuse Crunch, who's been part of a very successful system down in Tampa. A former Ranger player, of course, so there is a little bit of a connection there. I don't know if that's relevant or not. But look, if I'm Chris Drury, what I want consistency. I want structure. And I want to do what the Tampa Bay Lightning have done with John Cooper and what the Colorado Avalanche have done with Jared Bednar. And that is to promote from within. Over the last 5 years, we've had a guy in Hartford, Chris Knobloch, who used to be an assistant coach in Philadelphia.
You're advocating for Chris Knobloch right now.
I'm going to explain to you why. He's been the head coach in Hartford, and he's been allowed under Chris Drury, because Chris Drury was the assistant GM and at the same time GM in Hartford when Gordon was still here. He was allowed to establish a culture, to set up a structure in Hartford, and for the first time in 2 decades, the Wolfpack are actually doing something in the playoffs. You know, and sometimes it takes a couple of years before you see the product of a head coach, especially in the minors, because they have to overhaul everything. And when you look at John Cooper coached the Milwaukee Admirals, who were the Tampa Bay Lightning affiliate before their affiliate changed to the Syracuse Crunch, and then coached the Syracuse Crunch. He worked with players like Tyler Johnson, Alex Killorn, Nikita Kucherov, Andre Palat, Andre Schuster, JT Brown. So he worked with all these players down in Syracuse and in Milwaukee. And then when he became the head coach in Tampa, those players one by one came up. And I will always remember this interview that Nikita Kucherov did, where they asked him what was the biggest adjustment going from Syracuse to Tampa. And he said there was no real adjustment because everything's the same. And he was talking about very seemingly insignificant things like the layout of the locker room, the color of the jerseys, because the Syracuse Crunch play in the same color jerseys as the Tampa Bay Lightning. The fact that the head coaches have the same routine before and after the game. When they go over the coaches talk, when they have the bullet points are in the same order. There's a structure that is the same in Tampa as it is in Syracuse. And that's why players don't have to worry about those kind of adjustments off the ice. All they have to worry about is the adjustment on the ice. And I think over the last couple of years, Chris Knobloch has started to build something like that in Hartford. Now, maybe it's too soon. Maybe Knobloch needs a couple of 2-3 more years in Hartford. But look, if Chris Drury is happy with what Knobloch has established, then I wouldn't be surprised if he's the next head coach. Also, don't forget, when David Quinn was out with COVID, Chris Knobloch took over. Yeah. Chris Drury was one of his assistants. For a week and a half, Chris Drury firsthand not only observed how Knobloch coached the NHL team, but also observed how the players responded to him. Was there a positive or negative feedback between him and the veterans on the team, like Zibanejad and Panarin and Trouba? That's the kind of, it's almost like a trial run that you don't get with other coaches. So, and again, I'm just spitballing here. I'm just explaining why I think this could be an option. But maybe the Rangers are ready for that system they have in Hartford to carry over to New York. And when John Cooper moved over from the AHL to the NHL, a lot of the players I previously mentioned were still in the AHL. The guys like Tyler Johnson and Alex Killorn and JT Brown and Andre Palat. Same thing could be true for Chris Knobloch. Maybe we see guys like Matthew Robertson and Zach Jones and Adam Sikora and Adam Edstrom and Will Cooley make the jump, because with Knobloch behind the bench in New York, there's a familiarity there, so it's not as big of a leap.
That I like your reasoning, and I think my only real reason personally as to why I could see that not happening is just the current state of the Rangers are in at the end of the day. I think if this was a Rangers team even 2 years ago, I feel like Knobloch would almost be more best suit versus now, just because I'm like, why would Drury want still at the NHL level and I don't want to say inexperienced, because I like your reasoning. I just don't know if that is what Drury is going to favor here. And I'm really curious to see what route Drury goes in the interview process with this, because how much does he do focus on internally? That structure aspect, that familiarity aspect, those are important things. And I think more than anything, to help advocate for someone like Knobloch, is you'd have to imagine that a guy of his stature would be in favoritism of giving the kids more of a leash, giving them more power play time, giving them some more top six time, holding veterans accountable. Like that's what you'd hope for, again, with us only knowing the little sample size he's had. But I think externally, there's one name that I really thought about for a while. He was a former Rangers assistant, and Mike Sullivan. And I know that a lot of people aren't fans of Mike Sullivan. I've always had a soft spot for him personally. I think he is a smart coach, and I think I'm just kind of waiting for when the Pens are going to kind of cut loose with him, because let's be realistic here. The likelihood of him doing anything of significance with the Pens again, with their core, how it is right now, is pretty much slim to none, right? I mean, they finally stopped making playoffs for the first time in what feels like my entire lifetime now. And Sullivan had some really strong runs with them, but I just feel like Sullivan, a change of scenery is inevitable sooner than later. So should it say happen this season, if he is parted with, that is a guy to watch, in my opinion. He might not be the best option, but I think Sullivan is in that class of coaches where if you're going to have guys with experience, I would be in favor of, and guys that certainly know how to have deep playoff runs and actually have cups on their resume. Yes, I know that he didn't single-handedly help win them those cups. You know, it's nice when you have the Crosbys and the Malkins of the world to back you up, but the point stands. It's the structure. It's every single year the Penguins up until like now, because they parted with so many guys at the trade deadline to free up salary, and that didn't bode them well. They always make something out of nothing there, you know, and they do well with their external call-ups. Sullivan has always been praised for the guys that they bring up there in the minors and how well they thrive as soon as they hit the NHL level with the Penguins. Like those are characteristics about a coach where I have interest in, especially that next man up mentality. And every single year, again, being that consistent competitor, that contender. I think you could find those qualities in someone like Sullivan. But again, I'm not getting my hopes up because I don't know if he's going to be even cut loose, let alone if the Rangers would say get permission.
That's a good point, actually, because right now Sullivan's still the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So
yeah,
there's no indication that he is going to be replaced.
No, I feel like if you're the Penguins, though, it's got to happen sooner than later, though, right? I know they signed him to an extension not long ago, but like.
Well, Daryl Sutter signed a 2-year extension last October. So
exactly. So like, you know, I don't. Some people are saying John Cooper in the chat. Who wouldn't love Cooper? I don't see him going anywhere. I think
but John Cooper has no reason to leave Tampa.
He has no reason to leave Tampa, one. But two, even if, say, Tampa really starts to regress here, maybe they say go on a retool. Why wouldn't you want Cooper to still be their head coach? He's been with them for a decade now. Like, he's done great things.
And the goal should be to find the next John Cooper.
I agree. No. I'm not disagreeing there, and that is your way of saying let's give Knobloch a shot. That's exactly
No, I'm not saying Knobloch is like the slam dunk coach that's going to bring us to the cup and it's going to be a huge success. But
he's all the start of a dynasty, Steven. What are you talking about?
We all know that the NHL is a copycat league, right? General managers, especially presidents and owners, look at what worked for this team, what worked for that team. And look, if you look at the coaches that are available, Joel Quenneville, Daryl Sutter, Peter Laviolette, my biggest concern with those coaches is how effective are they in 2023? Because hockey in 2023 is vastly different than hockey 10 years ago, when Quenneville won a second cup, when Peter Laviolette was still taking teams to the Stanley Cup final, when Daryl Sutter was winning 2 cups. If you watch a whole game from 2013 and you watch a random game from this past season, the difference is night and day. Like the pace of the game, it's ridiculous how much faster the game is today than it was only 10 years ago. So my biggest concern with these established coaches is how will they do with hockey in 2023? The other thing is, and this is more a statistical thing, like more a theoretical thing, but there has not been a head coach to win a cup with 2 different teams since Scotty Bowman in 92 and 97.
Yep.
So it has been 26 years since a head coach won a Stanley Cup with the second team. Now, that doesn't mean anything, but like from a statistical standpoint, you're better off hiring a coach that hasn't won a cup yet than hiring a coach that has, statistically. But
Yep.
that's not really a serious entry to the debate. But look, Chris Drury has full control here. He's the general manager, he's the president. It's his team now. It's all up to him. And maybe going with Gallant 2 years ago and it not working out is proof that he needs to try something else. And if you look at that Devil series, man, they mentioned it on the broadcast last night in the Carolina Hurricanes New Jersey Devils game. Akira Schmidt in his last 5 starts has 2 shutouts and has been pulled twice. That's how bipolar he is in net. He's the Rangers.
No shit. He's literally a kid that was just brought up. Like, wow, color me shocked he's not consistent in the playoffs. But the Rangers view this guy as a fucking brick wall, and so we're going to shoot right at him the entire time.
Exactly. But this is all the result of the Rangers not having a system. Because if you skate into the zone with 3 players and you have no system, you're not going to be open for the shot. If you are, then it's going to be more by accident than by design. And that's the big issue the Rangers have right now. They have the players to play winning hockey. They just don't have the system to carry out to make it happen. And if you look at Carolina, they have that system. They play like a 5-man unit. When they dump the puck, they actually get to the puck on the forecheck. And it's always just one player because the other players are to the left and to the right. They swarm like a pincer move in the Army. They swarm the opponent like a pincer move. And the Rangers, look, I don't want to talk bad about the Rangers, but do you know during intermission at a hockey game, you have like those 6-year-old kids that play during intermission?
Yeah.
That's how the Rangers played sometimes.
I know.
Because they're all attracted to the puck. It's like a fucking magnet. It's like a disease. They all want to be near the puck.
And that's where you make the argument of not having a proper structure. Yes. And again, having some big egos on this team down the stretch. That's where it can come in hand. Not egos in the sense of like, oh, F you, like I want the puck. Just in the sense of like they're naturally drifting because you have a lot of scorers on this team, right? You have a lot of brilliant talent that wasn't utilized properly. And again, we're gonna expand on this more. We're planning to do another episode next week because we haven't even shared our true raw thoughts on the Rangers being bounced from playoffs. But we had to hop on here now to talk about our raw reactions to Gallant because that's of course a big deal. Step one of multiple steps that we're gonna see this summer and this Ranger team changing. And also, like, should the Rangers consider bringing anyone back, if anyone at all, right? Like, we're gonna get into all that. But Steven, we do have to wrap things up here in a minute. So I got to ask you, what is your final remarks on the Rangers parting ways with Gerard Gallant? Is there any guy outside of Knoblauch that crosses your mind that you think is a potential worthy candidate for at least the Rangers to give a call and say, hey, let's meet and let's talk things through? Anyone that's crossing your mind?
If you want to hear a name out of left field, Bob Hartley.
Oh God. Really? Really? Why?
Look, I'm just going
to get magic like when the Flames first brought him in.
I'm just going off of connections here. Bob Hartley was the coach when Drury won a cup in Colorado.
It's been a minute. It's been like 2 decades.
And this is I'm circling back to what I said earlier about Quenneville and Sutter and Laviolette. The concern is, how does a veteran coach like that adjust to hockey tactics specifically in 2023?
True.
And I don't know, Mike Sullivan maybe also falls into that category where I'm just not sure if he has what it takes to be successful with how the hockey game has evolved over the last couple of years. And this is a conversation we're going to have about Jared Bednar and John Cooper in 10, 15 years too. That the game changes so much, only a select few can adjust and stay relevant.
That's true. You're not wrong.
The last thing and I know some Ranger fans are talking about Mark Messier, but Mark Messier, if he wants to coach, he needs to start at the bottom and work his way up like everyone else.
I agree, and I don't, as much as we all love Mess, I feel like we could find ourselves in an unfortunate situation to what we had to a lesser extent with John Davidson. You know,
Mm,
a prominent Ranger name that everyone loved and cared
mm,
for, and for
yeah,
that tenure to end the way it did, you know, it's like no one wanted that, and it's
no.
unfortunate. And I think the last thing
I'm gonna say
any
one
Ranger,
final thing. I'm gonna throw out an
yeah,
idea here. Um,
I want to be
and
against
this is
Messier as an assistant.
a
That
Messier in an assistant role, like where he has a specific focus, that can work.
yes,
Another name that I wouldn't be surprised if eventually he's part of the coaching staff, but not part of the head coach's group of people that follows him around, like we see now with Gallant's guys, but a guy that's part of the organization's coaching staff, like Benoit Allaire. Benoit Allaire has been here almost 20 years now.
yep.
It's going to sound crazy, but Steve Valiquette as an offensive coordinator
I knew
in,
you
a,
were
in,
gonna
a,
fucking
in an
say that.
offensive coordinator role.
Clip this. Send this to Steve, please.
He The way he does the analysis on the broadcast is just eye opening to everyone. It's always spot on, and I think he can definitely bring some value to how this team operates offensively. Because the way he analyzes the game, he can see certain openings and certain adjustments that can work. Now, I wouldn't want him behind the bench, but maybe up in the booth, where he has a bird's eye view of the game and he can analyze the game and then communicate certain adjustments to the coaching staff behind the bench.
Yeah,
Because
I would never be against Valley in that type of role because
no,
to your point, again, I love his analysis. He knows what the hell he's talking about. Not
no.
that coaches that are currently in the league don't. But you know, it's to have someone that's been a follower of the organization for how many years now? Like it's almost like it would be smart to have people that have been around the team as much as someone like Valley has. They
Mhm.
know the ins and outs. They know what the current flaws are, right? And they see them on a nightly basis versus bringing in a Joe Schmo from who knows where that is bringing his system over or is learning a new system entirely, right? So, like, those are things to take into account with this coaching process on both the assistant and, of course, the head coach role. And that's one more thing, too, I'll say is like, I know that how Gallant has his guys, how a lot of veteran coaches that come in, they're like, oh, I want to bring in this guy. You know, he's been with me the past number of years.
That's another advantage of
That,
hiring a guy like Knobloch, because Chris Drury can surround him with guys where he has a little bit more input.
yeah,
Where Knobloch brings a certain skill set to the coaching staff, and you can surround him with guys that bring other aspects where Knobloch might not be as familiar. You can as a general manager or as a president, you can put together the coaching staff. But if you go with a veteran coach, you're going to get the seven dwarfs that come with it too. It's we saw this with Gallant. When Gallant was hired, they got rid of Jacques Martin. Jacques Martin was one of the best defensive coaches, or one of the best defensive assistant coaches we've had in a
exactly. But
long time.
it's just for the sake of, you know, having a clean slate and bringing in a
Yeah,
new group. That's all it
a,
is.
a veteran coach gets carte blanche. He can bring in his own guys, and sometimes it's to the detriment of that coach because they bring in their own guys because they're familiar, not because they cover up each other's flaws necessarily.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And as I said before, I'm really intrigued by this. It's annoying, you know. I feel like so since the start of us, how many? Okay, so this will be our second coaching change that we react with as Ranger fans doing the show together. It almost feels like three, but we didn't start when Quinny came into
No.
place. But you know, two years already and out. You know, you had this assumption when he was first signed. You
Mm,
didn't think that was going to last long. I obviously had hopes and aspirations, but you take it year by year, and
no.
at the end of the day, you know, his
And
tenure has come to an end, Gallant. But
yeah,
now,
the
hopefully,
end
we
the
get
end
a
of his
guy that can be here
tenure
more long term.
the end of his tenure has nothing to do with the results, because on paper he's one of the most successful Ranger coaches in history.
But that's the issue with just looking on paper.
But
This is
but
where it comes in key with being a fan that's watched game
exactly,
by game,
after
season
the
by season.
season's over, there are exit interviews. The general manager sits down with every player. And this is how Tortorella was fired in 2013 after taking the team to the second round of the playoffs.
Yep.
There was like on paper, that coach should not be fired. You make it to the second round of the playoffs, the final 8, that coach should not be fired. But it's not that black and white. And the exit interviews with players have a big impact on what happens to the coach. And that's what we're seeing here.
And you saw the type of comments that Kako made. I'm sure put a little salt in the wound there.
Yeah, it's not just that, but it's also Goudreau just flat out saying, "Oh no, he just sends us out there and lets us do what we want."
Yep.
And
it almost feels like that the players said that in a manner of like, all right, like that was fun at first, but like, you know, we're all talented, but just because we have talent doesn't mean that we know exactly what everyone's thought process is. Oh, like you're going left, you're going right. Okay, like got it. Like no, naturally players have a certain intuition, which is understandable. But beyond that, unless you're at a truly elite level, it's not going to happen. And that's the whole point of having a coaching staff.
And again, I want to reiterate that this doesn't take any blame away from the players. The players were terrible.
No, Panarin was absolute dog shit. Trouba was non-existent.
I would say there were like 3 players on the Rangers that played well. It's Kreider, Mikkola, and Shesterkin.
Yeah.
And
Igor doesn't deserve. And here's the difference. And then we gotta get out of here because I'm running short on time, Steven. But here's the difference between Igor and say Hank. Igor is not a long term like Hank is, contract wise. When that bad boy's up at this rate, you think he's gonna stay? What are we doing to encourage him? You know, we have another generational talent of a goaltender that we're treating the exact same way that we did with Lundqvist.
I wonder if the Rangers would have had a different strategy building the team if they didn't have elite goaltenders to fall back on.
I 100% agree that would be the case.
It makes me almost wish we never drafted Lundqvist and Shesterkin.
I wouldn't go that far.
Almost.
But
just to see how they would build the team differently. Because if you don't have that elite goalie to fall back on, you're going to have to build it from scratch. You're going to have a whole different thought process into how you're going to put your team together.
Yeah. And
like Lundqvist and Shesterkin made it easy for the Rangers to take shortcuts.
And the Rangers have been spoiled as all hell for over 2 decades now when it comes to their goaltending. So, you know, and that's another thing that we'll have to watch and highlight on how they go by Igor upcoming season. But that's a long road ahead. We just got to focus. This is going to be a big summer for the Rangers now, say the least. We knew and anticipated some significant changes to be had. But to see Gallant part with this soon leads me to believe it's going to be a long and hopefully positive summer. And the changes that are made, I'm sure we're going to see some rash changes. Hopefully, if some contracts could maybe get eaten. I don't know what Drury's going to have up his sleeve, but Drury, again, has made some very good moves in his first couple of years as Rangers GM.
And just a reminder for Ranger fans, don't expect the head coach to be hired necessarily within the next few days.
No.
When David Quinn was fired, it took Drury a month to sign a new coach. So he's going to take his time. And if it is not log, they're probably not going to announce it until the Wolfpack are finished with their season. And they just beat the Providence Bruins in 4 games, 3-1 in a best of 5. So they're going on to the 3rd round now, going up against the Hershey Bears. The further the Wolfpack make it, the
more it's going to raise eyebrows and have Chris be like, like
the more I'm leaning towards it. Like it's in no way like a slam dunk case, but the head coaches that are out there do you really? And this is the thing with Gallant 2 years ago, right? I compared him to Paul Stastny because everyone always talks about signing a center in free agency. You have to sign your number 1 center in free agency, but the number 1 center is never available. It's always a guy like Paul Stastny. No disrespect to Paul Stastny, but that's always the best center that's available. And it's the same with Gerard Gallant 2 years ago. He's not a bad coach, but he was just the best available in a very weak coaching class, so to speak, that was available. So
you're not wrong. It was probably the best of what was there.
Yeah. And to make one final comparison for people who watch The Office, Gerard Gallant was kind of the Michael Scott of NHL coaches. He just let people do what they wanted, and the team performed, so he gets a lot of credit.
I
But
hate that you somehow just made that work.
but the Rangers need a David Wallace right now.
They do need a David Wall. They need someone
Yeah.
at the top. That's actually
or Charles Minor, worst case scenario.
Yeah. And with that being said, that's going to do it for Rangers Review episode 77. If you guys were watching live, appreciate you guys all in here in the live chat. People on replay, let us know your comments down below on your raw reactions to the Rangers parting ways with their 2-year tenure head coach and Gerard Gallant. And what name of a coach would you like to potentially see the Rangers go after this summer before they make their inevitable decision? Again, guys, thank you all so much for watching, listening. We'll be back at hopefully sometime this upcoming week for a new episode because we have a lot more Ranger hockey to deep dive on the year that was and the unfortunate year that was that fell short for the Rangers and ultimately what is next for them in the months ahead. But again, appreciate you guys so much for watching. This is me, Wardy. You guys know where to find me, especially if you are Mets fans. Check out the Wardy NY YouTube channel. That is Statboy_Steven. Make sure to check him out on Twitter for all your Rangers needs, especially prospect updates weekly, daily, all the time. And we'll talk to you again real soon. Steven, let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.